When should you trade the queens? At 1600 rating level, many players get this wrong. Sometimes the exchange helps, and sometimes it ruins your position. So today we'll see both sides and try to increase your understanding. So let's start with this simple example. This is black to play here, and of course the queen exchange is being offered. So please remember that whenever you have an opportunity to either exchange the queens, or you can initiate the exchange of queens by doing something, then how should you take a decision? So there are two things that you must ask yourself. Number one, the king safety part, and number two, the material part. So if you feel like your king is weak than that of your opponent, then you should think about exchanging the queens. And also from the material perspective, if you are up in material, then also you should try to exchange the queens. Now, if the combination of these two things is there, that is, your king is weak and you are up in material, then you must exchange the queens. Now, if you look at this position, then that's the case. White is trying to play queen g6 check, and then maybe create some activity on the king side. And of course, black is up in material because black is a rook for white's bishop and a pawn. So in this position, queens must be exchanged. That's very important. So two things, whenever the queen exchange is being offered, keep in mind please, the king safety part and the material part. Then in this position, if bishop takes d3, no worries. Black can play something like rook c8, bring the rook on the open file, and then there is this rook c1 idea. And then the pawns can be attacked, the king can be improved, and yeah, this is a pass pawn as well, by the way. So it's what the king will do. It will try to stop this pass pawn. Then who will save these pawns? And if white tries to safeguard the king side pawns, then there might be this idea and then pass pawn. So at some point it will become too much for white to handle. Remember, the king safety part and the material part, these two are the backbone when you make a decision about exchanging the queens. Now, let's go for the next position. So this is white to play here. Now, let's try to understand, first of all, the material. This time the material is equal. Okay, so that doesn't help us much, at least in the decision of whether we should exchange the queens or not. So then the second part, the king safety part. That's where we can see the difference, because black has played g6. On the other hand, there is no h7 pawn. I mean, there is no pawn on the h file actually. g6 has been played, but where's the dark square bishop? There's no dark square bishop. So that makes the king side a lot more weaker. So black's king is much more weaker than that of white. And also, there is this rook on f4. It can go to h4 and then do something. So that piece is also there that can help us in the attack. So for that reason, we must avoid exchanging the queens. So, all right, we have made that decision. We want to avoid exchange of queens. That's fine. But then where to go with the queen? So we want to target, of course, that weak king. And for that reason, we must bring the queen on g5. So the idea in this position is queen h6, rook h4, or rook h4, queen h6. There can be a really nice idea of rook e6 as well, sacrificing the rook for f takes e6, queen g6, king h8, and there would be either rook takes f8 or rook h4 mate. So, and this would be a bit too much for black to handle. So here the material is equal, but from king safety perspective, black's king was not that safe because there is no pawn on h7. There are not many defenders there, and especially g6 has been played and the bishop is not on g7, so the dark squares are weak. So we should avoid exchange of queens. And how should we avoid exchange of queens? We should try to avoid exchange of queens in such a manner that we can increase the pressure on our opponent's weak king. Now, these are the type of positions is exactly why I built chessneurons.com. It's the only place with daily Grandmaster curated positional puzzles, each explained in simple language. Perfect for sharpening your decision making beyond tactics. So let's go for the next example. This is black to play here. Now, first, material. So from material perspective, black is upper pawn. That's good. Second thing, king safety. Because see, sometimes what might happen is some of you might be like, all right, what if we are up in material, but what if our opponent's king is weak? Then what should we do? So see, if you're up in material and if your opponent's king is weak, then you can see how active your pieces are. And if you feel like your pieces are much more active, then you can keep the queens even if you're up in material, because you can try to take advantage of that weak king. But if you're up in material and your opponent's king is weak, but your pieces are not as active, then you can be like, okay, let's just trade the queens. Now, coming back to this position from material perspective, black's up a pawn, that's good. But the king is still in the center, king safety. And the thing is that this bishop is not yet developed. And even if the bishop was developed, the long castle would be quite risky because of this semi-open file. Short castle right now is not possible, and the g7 bishop is not there. So king safety is a bit of an issue, and because of lack of development, it's not so easy for black to deal with that. So in this position, you must look for exchange of queens. And in this position, there is a way for black to do that, and black can do that by playing the move queen h5. White has to exchange the queens, because if queen g7 is played, then rook g8 and the queen would be trapped. And after queen takes h5, yes, the knight gets slightly misplaced on h5, but doesn't matter. Now the king safety issue is not there anymore. There can be knight c5 ideas, then the bishop can be developed. Then maybe there can be ideas of, who knows, king side castle, queen side castle, or even king e7, because queens are not there. So it's not going to be that easy for white to create activity against the king. So please remember, your king remains in the center. You are behind in development, and your opponent's pieces seem a bit more active than that of yours. To take away that activity, the best thing would be the exchange of queens. Now, let's go for the next position. So this is white to play here. So many things are happening in this position, by the way, but let's first try to consider this from material perspective. So white's down in material. So the pawns are equal, but white has the bishop for black's rook. Exchange of queens is being offered, and of course, so even though white is down in material, but white should not be worried. White can always capture the rook, not immediately, by the way, because there is queen takes queen. So the most obvious move in this position seems to be, all right, let's just play queen takes e6, f takes e6, and let's take the rook. We'll get the material back. Yes, that's not a bad idea, but we should try to look at the position in a bit more depth. Black's king is still in the center. Black has not completed that development. So we should ask ourselves, can I actually try to take advantage of it instead of just getting the material back immediately? So when we look at the forcing moves, when we try to take advantage of that, then there is this very instructive move, bishop a4 check. So just targeting the king, and black must play rook d7 in this position. There is no other move actually. So rook d7. And then see, the simplest way in this position, if you want, would be to play something like bishop takes d7, king takes d7, and then yeah, we can even play queen b5 check and then try to do something. But then queen c6, and of course bishop is hanging, and exchange of queens is still being offered. So we can say, okay, double pawns are there, and then we can play. So that is there. But once again, why are we in a rush to capture the rook? We can do it later as well. So in this position, the move that we can do is rook e1. Wait, why are we exchanging the queens? No, so that's not good, because if the queens are exchanged, then king has nowhere to go. There will be bishop e7, but then there is rook takes e7, and then the game is over. And if something like h takes e5, then just queen d2. This is also under pressure. This is also under pressure. This is just lost actually. So yeah. So please remember that next time if you have sacrificed some material, then and your opponent's king is weak, then don't be like, okay, let me exchange the queens to get the material back. Please try to remember why you have sacrificed material. You have done that to target your opponent's king, and it will be extremely helpful for you if you are able to keep the queens. So look for the ways to continue attacking that king, to continue putting pressure on the opponent. And one of the key ways to do that would be to avoid exchange of queens. So next time when exchange of queens is being offered, please evaluate the position from the perspective that I've told you, and you will be able to make a better decision about when to trade the queens and when not to trade. Thanks everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.